that being the Jags and the Dolphins. If you watched or listened to my predictions from last week, you'll know that I was dead wrong in terms of who would win, as well as which quarterback would play better overall. For the Jags, things took a turn for the worst. I figured Minshew would continue to play well after solid performances in Week 1 and 2, but it just seemed like Minshew was never able to find a rhythm with the offense on Thursday. Now, he moved the ball, but wasn't able to find the end zone through the air or on the ground. Minshew found success in terms of getting first downs, and quite honestly, the entire Jags offense did, getting 275 yards through the air and over 65 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. So again, the Jags offense wasn't unable to move the ball. They just were, one, unable to create turnovers defensively, which consistently put the Jags in bad field position, and two, unable to create long, sustained drives on offense, and those two kind of correlate, as the Miami secondary played extremely well on third down. Now, the Jags punted 3 total times, while the Finns punted 4 times. The Jags gained over 340 offensive yards, while the Finns only had under 300 in total. So again, the Jags created more movement offensively, as you just saw, but the Finns found more ways to score both through defensive stops and offensive production, especially in short field scenarios. The Dolphins looked surprisingly good as well, with Fitzpatrick playing a really sound football game. Just 2 incompletions, coupled with 2 touchdowns, shows why the Finns feel comfortable letting Tua develop before he takes the field, and I love that. You do not want to throw a starting quarterback, especially one picked early in the draft, right out on the butcher block. I mean, with Joe Burrow, I feel like it's a little different because Joe Burrow seems like he could very well be a kind of generational talent. But with a player like Patrick Mahomes, they wanted to develop him for a year because at first he might not be a generational talent, but by giving him that year in the system, by not throwing him out into the starting role day one, you're able to build that connection with the team, that fitting, that kind of comfortable feel for the quarterback so that when they step out on the field, the only thing they're uncomfortable with is being in the NFL spotlight. Because when you throw him out on day one, he's uncomfortable with multiple things. Outside of just the NFL spotlight, he's uncomfortable with his receivers, he's uncomfortable with the playbook, he's uncomfortable with the style of offense a lot of the time, he's uncomfortable with the head coach, he doesn't feel like he's in charge of the offense, he's never played a snap with the offense. I mean, in a real NFL game, that is. But my point is that you want your new quarterback to be as comfortable as possible, and throwing him in game one makes that practically impossible. Now, Joe Burrow struggled in day one. He didn't play amazing. But in game 2, he played great. He played amazing. So with Joe Burrow, it seems he has developed very, very quickly within the Bengals system. And he's found success throwing the ball. He has found great success. Even this past week, he threw very well. Granted, he didn't win the game, and he didn't lose it either, so I guess you can give that to him. But he tied with the Eagles 23-23. But in the end, you look at Joe Burrow, and yes, that's kind of an oddball out. But when you look at quarterbacks like, just quarterbacks that have been thrown on the butcher block in day one, quarterbacks that weren't given much time to develop at all, they often fail. Or they often don't look good in year one, and then they lose all NFL confidence. If you're a quarterback in the NFL and you are thrown out on the field with the expectation that you are going to perform well, that you are going to be the thing, that the person that turns around this team, that brings this team back to the playoffs or back to their heyday, and you fail, I mean, that just destroys your confidence as a quarterback. So it is insanely good that the Dolphins are holding off with Tua and letting him develop. A quarterback taken that high, a lot of the times, is forced to start day one. A lot of the time. And a lot of the time when he does, like I said, he's uncomfortable and he loses his confidence. And the only way he continues to develop if he plays poorly in year one is if the coaches do a great job in convincing him that he has talent. And a lot of these young quarterbacks are coupled with brand new head coaches or young head coaches, first year NFL head coaches. And it just doesn't work out because they're thrown into the mix day one with a head coach who isn't even confident in himself because he's never coached an NFL game, or he's only coached a year in the NFL. And it's just a lot of factors that come together that are kind of counting against you. And in the end, if you want to build a franchise for the future, if you want to build a dynasty for the future, you desperately need to hold off on throwing your quarterback on the butcher block day one. You just can't do it. And especially considering how bad the teams are that these quarterbacks usually get drafted to. A team doesn't get a high draft pick if they're really good. The only way they get it is if they trade up, and oftentimes if they were really good, they wouldn't need a new quarterback. A lot of these teams, like the Bengals, like the Dolphins, like the Panthers, like the Jags, like the Jets, often have rosters that need a lot of work to be done, that need changes both offensively and defensively, and that even with a good quarterback, even with a player like Kirk Cousins, even with a player like Dak Prescott, even with a player like Gardner Minshew, would severely struggle. Because even though those quarterbacks have some NFL experience, especially Kirk Cousins, the offense isn't good enough because those quarterbacks only perform as well as the offense around them. Dak Prescott has been showing us that he might be a little underrated this year. So far, he'll have to keep it consistent, but I'll still keep him in that category. He's a franchise guy, but he's only as good as the offense around him. So if the offense has a bad day, if the offense isn't getting super open, then he's not going to have a good day either. And in year one, these quarterbacks they have a lot of talent. That's why they're drafted early. But in the end, you're looking at a player that, while he's drafted early, while he has this talent, he doesn't have that experience. So he is only going to play as well as the offense around him. He needs the offense to do good in order for him to do good. And if you don't have a good offense, if you don't have a good O-line, if you don't have a good defense, if you don't have a good head coach, that's not going to work out. Because he is going to struggle, and he's not going to feel like he's on a good team. And a lot of times the quarterbacks reflect that on themselves and say, well, what am I not doing right? So, in the end, I'm happy that the Dolphins are doing this. The Dolphins defense also surprised this past Sunday, keeping the Jags out of the end zone and winning the third down game multiple times, not to mention their consistent pressure on Minshew. They only got one interception, but they got a good amount of pressure on Minshew. The Dolphins didn't dominate this game, but they did more than enough to win and to upset the odds with a 31-13 win over the Jags.